looking on the other side, I mean, what perspective can you give us? You know, here you had this 25-6 margin consistently, and so there was a minority that continually opposed.
Yeah.
But to the point where when I look and look at newsletters, websites, I mean, it's a very passionate minority. And to this day, I still think that they disagree with what happened.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Why is it so deep?
Well, that's a very, very good question, and I think that position has some merit. I speak to it on a couple of different levels. I think at the most abstract level first. When you and I, as nice middle-class people, well-educated, who can speak uninflected English, look back on our past and on the lives lived by our grandparents and our parents, there's a certain kind of, we look back and there's a certain kind of shame, right? It's not as if in 1923 Japanese Americans in Seattle were regarded with very much respect, right? They lived in the ghetto. They had no skills. They couldn't speak the language. They were these bizarre people from somewhere, look weird. And so then we endure at least in this country, the ultimate form of what some now would say dissing. We go diss so badly that we're shoved into camps and says, why couldn't, this is in some ways, you know, it's emotionally very compelling, but I don't think intellectually finally justifiable. But Mom, but Dad, but Grandpa, Grandma, why did you let this man do this and lead us out of our homes and into the desert? Because, sort of in quotes, if I were there, I could have stopped it. Because, you see, I have a BA in chemical, or a BS in chemical engineering, and I have these powerful friends, and I could have called someone at Channel 7. No, you couldn't have. Channel 7, the equivalents of Channel 7 hated it. I could have called someone at the LA Times. They're so sympathetic. The LA Times hated us. So in some ways, it seems to me it's a denial of what was really happening then. Everybody, from Walter Lippmann at the top to Walter Winchell at the bottom, hated us. And I don't care how many degrees you got from Harvard, it wouldn't have mattered because, in fact, nobody had a degree from Harvard at that point. So in my judgment, it's a way, this can be an easy way to say it, but it's a way of scapegoating somebody for what happened. But, you know, that anger and that sadness and that shame is legitimate, and it's in some ways it's understandable that it goes somewhere. You can't say, well, the bureaucrats in the U.S. Army and the Justice Department, those sons of bitches, right? No, that doesn't work. But one of our own, aha, that bastard did it. But as I say, the sentiment is legitimate, but I finally have to come around and say, you know, I don't think it can be justified by any close reading of the documentary material of the time. In the end, why did Mike recommend that we cooperate? Because if you didn't, you were going to be shot. So you make the best of a very, very bad hand. And, you know, 1923, 1930, 1935, 1940, we were nigger Jew Puerto Ricans. They had no power. You think because you're a full professor at UCLA, you have power. You don't have any power today. You wouldn't have had any power in 1941 to stop this. I also think at the most personal level, you know, here the community's traditional East Side leadership was decapitated. It was taken away early, as you know. And here's this 26-year-old kid from Salt Lake City who's not even a part of the West Coast experience comes in and says, well, I speak uninflected English. I work for 2 senators from Utah. I have Washington experience. I'm going to tell you what to do. And so I think you look back at that and you say, well, what? This is a usurpation. And so there was, I think, some resentment of that to this day, because our community is close enough. You always know somebody who knows somebody, right? You can't say anything bad because everybody's related some way. And so there's some there's some sense of, well, my grandfather was taken out. He should have been the real leader. If the East Side leadership would have been in place, we wouldn't have gone, because this was a legitimate leadership at the time, and this usurper comes in, this little brat, fucks us. All right? And I think also, at the most personal level, I think, you know, to this day, people say, Jesus, how come people in the JCL got to bring in a trunk and 2 suitcases, and I can only bring what I could carry in my little bag, my little Nimotsu? Those sons of bitches. And, you know, Mike was also kind of an egotist and hurt some feelings, probably did some power plays against some folks in JCL. And who knows? I have no idea. But people who feel negatively about Mike really hate him. And the full explanation of how deep that goes, I can't really fathom, although I don't think it can finally be justified by his public acts. I think some of it is quite personal.
Well, at this point, do you think that the schism is so deep that it will never be repaired, or do you see just over time that this will just disappear?
I think over time it'll disappear, because, you know, my kids, who are now in their 20s, they'll look back on this at some point, maybe in their 50s or 60s, and say, what the hell was all that about? You know, and we've had profound national schisms, like when the South lost a civil war. They're still fighting that civil war and saying, God damn, Martin Luther King is not going to be able to do this to the Confederate dead, that bastard. That was 100 years. And now, you know, they say, well, gee, you know, boy, those guys play real good. Those black kids, they show a lot of character playing for Bear Bryant's old team at the University of Alabama. How could we have done that to those people? So, and also I think there'll be a more considered, balanced historical judgment of Mike's strengths and weaknesses. You know, in 1942, after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, could you imagine that Japan and the United States could ever do anything together again?
Right. Mm-hmm. So these things do over time do have a way of.
Yeah, because people want to live their lives, and you know, most people aren't like the 47 Ronin who gallantly carry their grudges forever. Oh, come on, let's. As we often say in my home, all right, everybody quiet down. Let's watch the game. The Giants are on. Everybody shut up. Let's watch the Giants game. Okay? Quiet, please.